March 3, 2026. Put a circle around that date on your calendar, mental or physical. If you're listening to this, you're effectively living through history. And I don't mean that in the cheap marketing sense of the word.
Absolutely not.
We are looking at day 3 of the Iran war, and welcome to today's deep dive into the source material we've gathered on this.
Thanks. It is definitely a date that historians are going to be arguing about and, analyzing for decades. It's a hinge point.
Exactly, a hinge point. Because just, 72 hours ago, the world watched what felt like the season finale of a very long, very stressful show.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
U.S. and Israeli strikes resulted in the death of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. We called it a decapitation strike in our initial notes. It felt final. It felt like the credits were about to roll. But what we are seeing today, looking at these reports, this isn't the credits.
No, not at all. If the strike was the explosion, what we are seeing now is the shockwave. And, the shockwave is often more destructive than the initial blast.
Right. And that's the premise of today's deep dive. We aren't just looking at the crater where a leader used to be. We're looking at the fracture lines spreading out from that crater. The conflict has metastasized. It's gone from these targeted strikes to a multi-domain war. We're talking air, sea, proxies, and the global economy all at once.
That word metastasized is the right one. It really implies an uncontrolled spread. We've moved past the phase of surgical actions and into something deeply systemic. This isn't just a skirmish anymore. It is potentially the redrawing of the Middle East map in real time.
So we have a massive stack of updates here. I've got military reports, economic forecasts that honestly look like heart attack monitors and social media scrapes from inside Tehran. Our mission today, for you listening, is to synthesize all of this to answer one massive question.
The big one.
Is this the end of the regime, or is this the beginning of World War III?
It's a terrifying dichotomy, isn't it? And the honest answer, looking at the data we have, is that the door is wide open for both.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the military landscape, because the sheer velocity of what has happened in the last 24 hours is just mind-bending. We're calling this section the air war. But even that feels like an understatement.
It's an air dominance campaign. That's the doctrinal term. But even that feels a bit clinical for the violence we're seeing on the ground.
Let's look at the numbers first to set the scale. Over 2,200 coalition strikes across 19 provinces in just 72 hours. That is double the volume of the first 48 hours alone.
To put that 2,200 number in perspective for the listeners, think about the logistics required to put 2,200 sorties into the air in 3 days. You aren't just talking about pilots hopping in jets.
Right, it's a whole operation.
Exactly. You're talking about the ground crews turning those jets around, refueling them, rearming them, checking the hydraulics, and getting them back on the catapult or the runway.
It's an industrial feat as much as a military one.
Right. In a standard air campaign, you usually see a ramp-up period. You dip your toe in, you test the air defenses, you degrade them slowly. This was a sledgehammer. Doing this volume in 72 hours implies that this target list has been sitting in a folder in the Pentagon and Tel Aviv for years, just waiting for the go order.
And the result of this sledgehammer? The sources are saying the U.S. and Israel have achieved de facto air superiority over Tehran and central Iran. Now, I want to pause on that term. Air superiority, we hear it in movies all the time. What does it actually mean in this specific context? Does it mean they can just fly wherever they want?
Basically, yes. There are levels to this, right? Air supremacy means the enemy can't fly at all. Air superiority means you can conduct operations without prohibitive interference. What the sources are telling us is that the coalition can now loiter.
Loiter, like just hang around in the sky.
Exactly. They aren't just doing hit-and-run strikes anymore. They can keep assets over the targets for extended periods.
How is it even possible against Iran? I thought Iran had spent the last decade building up this massive air defense network. We've heard about the S-300s, the Bavar systems. Did those just not work?
They worked, but they were overwhelmed. You have to remember the context here. Iran's air defense grid was already significantly weakened during the 2025 war with Hezbollah.
Oh, right.
They took hits then that they never fully repaired due to sanctions. So they were operating on a patched-up shield.
So the door was already cracked open a bit.
The door was cracked, and the hinges were rusty. The coalition spent the first 24 hours focusing almost exclusively on what we call SE, suppression of enemy air defenses.
Can you break that down for a listener? How do you suppress a missile system that is explicitly designed to kill you?
It's a mix of soft kill and hard kill tactics. The soft kill is electronic warfare. You have Aircraft like the EA-18G Growler blasting out jamming signals that essentially blind the radar. If the Iranian operator looks at his screen, he just sees static or ghost targets. He can't get a lock.
And the hard kill.
That's the kinetic part. You fire an anti-radiation missile that tracks the source of the radar signal. So if the Iranian operator turns on his radar to try and see through the jamming, the missile rides that radar beam right down his throat.
Wow.
It forces them to keep their radars off entirely. And once the radar is off, the S-300 represents nothing more than a very expensive truck parked in the desert.
And specifically, the reports say they targeted the Bavar 373 batteries, right?
Right. The Bavar 373 is the indigenous Iranian system. It's their pride and joy, roughly equivalent to the Russian S-300. Taking those out was a psychological blow as much as a tactical one. It proved that their homegrown tech couldn't stop Western air power.
But, and there's always but, in war, this dominance comes with a cost. We aren't just talking about burning metal here. We are talking about people. The casualty numbers in the source material are grim.
They are very grim.
Iranian sources, state media, but it's corroborated by the Red Crescent, are reporting at least 550 dead and over 1,200 wounded. And looking at the target map, these aren't just military bases out in the middle of nowhere. These are command centers near major cities.
That's the brutal reality of modern warfare. The IRGC has embedded its command and control infrastructure right into urban environments. When you strike a communications hub in Tehran, you are inevitably going to shatter windows and bring down buildings in the surrounding blocks.
Right, the collateral damage.
Exactly. 550 dead in 3 days is a high number, but considering the sheer volume of 2,200 strikes, it actually suggests the targeting is extremely precise. In a less precise campaign, that number would easily be in the thousands.
That's a pretty cold calculus, though.
It is the coldest calculus there is, but we have to look at the other side of the ledger, too. This isn't a one-way street. The sources confirm we have the first combat deaths for the U.S. in this war.
Yeah, this stopped me in my tracks when I read it.
Yeah.
3 service members killed, 12 wounded at Udeid Air Base in Qatar.
This is a major, major escalation point. Udeid is the beating heart of U.S. air operations in the region.
But how did they get hit? I thought we had Patriot batteries and Thade systems all over that place.
We do, but ballistic missiles are ultimately a numbers game. Iran launched a massive barrage. If you fire 50 missiles and the defense system intercepts 95% of them.
That still leaves 2 or 3 that get through.
Exactly. And when a ballistic missile warhead hits, even if it's just a lucky shot that slips through the net, it causes massive devastation.
And the political fallout of this. 3 dead Americans.
It changes the entire chemistry of the war in Washington. Until now, this could be framed to the public as a punitive operation or a security measure. But once you have flag-draped coffins coming home to Dover Air Force Base, the political constraints dissolve. It becomes personal. The American public might be war-weary, but they rarely tolerate troops being killed without a very heavy response.
And we can't overlook the Israeli side either. 11 civilians dead.
In Tel Aviv and the north. And the weapon used is really significant here. Hypersonic missiles.
Hypersonic. That's a buzzword we hear a lot in these military briefings. Why does it matter so much here?
Speed and maneuverability. A traditional ballistic missile goes up and comes down in a predictable arc, like a fly ball in baseball. A hypersonic missile flies lower, faster, above Mach 5, and it can actually change direction in flight. It gives the interceptors much, much less time to react.
So they can dodge the defense systems.
Exactly. The fact that Iran is using them and successfully hitting targets shows they still have teeth. They haven't been entirely defanged despite the air superiority we just talked about.
Speaking of the region, there was a detail in the reports that I almost missed, but you highlighted it in our pre-show notes as a absolute game changer, the Qatar incident.
The twist.
Yes, the Qatari Air Force shot down 2 Iranian Su-24 bombers.
This is huge. I really cannot overstate how significant this development is.
Play devil's advocate for me for a second. It's a war. Planes violate airspace, they get shot down. Why is this specific instance so important?
You have to look at who Qatar is historically. For the last 20 years, Qatar has played the role of the Switzerland of the Gulf. They walk this incredibly tight tightrope. They host the massive U.S. base at Al Udeid, like we said, but they also share the world's largest natural gas field, the North Dome South Pars field, with Iran.
So they're physically tied to both sides.
Deeply tied. They maintain cordial diplomatic relations with Tehran. They are the back channel. When the U.S. wants to talk to the Taliban or Hamas or Iran, they very often go through Doha.
So they are the ultimate neutral broker.
Exactly. And neutral brokers do not shoot down the military aircraft of their neighbors. For a Qatari pilot to flip the switch and fire a missile at an Iranian jet, that is Qatar definitively picking a side.
And they picked the U.S. side.
They had to, given the base. But in doing so, they have burned the bridge with Tehran. It signifies a very public fracture in the old regional dynamics. It tells us that the Gulf states are terrified. They aren't trying to de-escalate or play peacekeeper anymore. They are hunkering down for a massive fight.
It's not just Qatar, though, is it?
No, look at the rest of the region. Saudi Arabia has activated its Patriot batteries. Jordan has completely closed its airspace. The UAE has declared a state of emergency. The entire Gulf is on a wartime footing. They know that a wounded Iran is a dangerous Iran. If the regime feels like it's going down, the fear is they will try to take the whole neighborhood with them.
Which brings us to the Axis Strikes Back section of our outline. Iran isn't just sitting there taking these punches. They launched 180 ballistic missiles and drones overnight.
A massive salvo.
Yeah.
And look at the targeting. It's very deliberate.
We mentioned the U.S. casualties, but the sources also detail a major fire at a U.S. logistics hub in Kuwait and damage to Udeid Air Base in the UAE.
They are targeting the logistics. This is smart asymmetrical strategy. They know they can't win a dogfight against American F-35s, so what do? They try to blow up the fuel depots, the ammunition dumps, the runways. They're trying to slow down the coalition's ability to actually generate those 2,200 sorties we talked about earlier.
Cut the supply lines.
Exactly. And the proxies are hyperactive too. Hezbollah has escalated with 300 rockets fired into Israel. The sources explicitly say this is the most intense barrage since the 2025 conflict.
Which tells us something crucial about the Iranian command and control, right?
Yes. Despite the death of Khamenei, despite the massive strikes on Tehran, the phone lines to Beirut are still working. The orders are still going out. Fire everything. The Hydra has lost a head, but the other heads are still biting hard.
Okay, so we have the air war, the missile war, the proxy war. That is all the kinetic stuff on land. But now we need to pivot to the water. Because if you want to know why your 401k might tank tomorrow or why your grocery bill is about to double, you have to look at the ocean.
The naval theater. This is the sleeper threat. This is the one everyone in the intel community has been having nightmares about for 40 years.
We're calling this the naval nightmare in our notes. It's all about the Strait of Hormuz.
The choke point of the global economy. At its narrowest, the shipping lanes are only 2 miles wide in either direction. 2 miles. That is absolutely nothing in naval terms.
The sources describe the IRGC Navy using swarm tactics, fast attack boats, midget submarines. It sounds, frankly, it sounds pretty low-tech compared to the stealth aircraft carriers we were just talking about.
It is low-tech, but that's the whole point. It's asymmetric warfare. You don't need a billion-dollar destroyer to sink a billion-dollar destroyer. You just need 50 cheap speedboats loaded with explosives and anti-ship missiles coming from every direction at once.
It's like a swarm of bees attacking a bear.
That's a perfect analogy. The bear might swat and kill 40 of them, but if 10 get through and sting the eyes, the bear is in serious trouble. And there has been a real exchange already. Iran sank an Emirati patrol vessel and damaged 2 others. Coalition destroyers hit back and sank 5 Iranian vessels. But the gunfights aren't actually the real headline here.
Right, it's the lines.
Physical sea mines. The report confirms Iran has deployed sea mines in 2 of the narrow channels in the strait.
This feels like World War II stuff. Sea mines.
It's old tech, but it is terrifyingly effective. A sea mine is a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. You don't even need to blow up a ship to win. You just need to convince the world that the water is unsafe to sail in.
And the data shows it's working perfectly. Tanker traffic dropped 70% immediately.
70%. That is a catastrophic drop for global supply chains. And the reason isn't that 70% of the ships were sunk. It's the insurance markets.
Explain that connection for the listener.
Lloyd's of London, the massive maritime insurance giants, they look at the reports of sea mines and swarm boats, and they just pull coverage. They designate the strait a war risk zone. No captain, and certainly no massive shipping company, is going to sail a supertanker carrying $100 million worth of crude oil into a literal minefield without insurance. It's financial suicide.
So the ships just start moving. And when the ships start moving, the oil stops flowing. The sources point out that roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply goes through that tiny strip of water.
And we felt the impact of that instantly. Oil hit $138 a barrel overnight. That is the highest it has been since the 2008 financial crisis.
$138. And we're just on day 3.
And the models, if you look at the speculation in our sources, they predict that if the strait stays contested for another week, we are looking at $180 plus per per barrel.
Okay, let's pause there. $180 a barrel. I want to make sure you, the listener, understand what that actually looks like in your everyday life. Because sometimes we hear barrel price and we just think, okay, gas will be $5 a gallon. I'll take the bus.
It's way, way worse than just gas prices. Gas prices are the annoyance you see immediately, but oil is the actual blood of the global economy. It's in everything.
Give us the supply chain view on this.
Think about plastics. Think about basic chemicals. But most importantly, think about food. Modern agriculture is incredibly energy intensive. You need diesel for the tractors and the harvesters. You need natural gas to create nitrogen fertilizer. If the price of energy doubles globally, the price of fertilizer triples.
So the farmers simply can't afford to plant as much crop.
Or they have to charge way more for the crop they do plant. You are looking at a fertilizer food feedback loop. It means serious inflation in the grocery store in Ohio or London, but in places like Egypt or Pakistan. You are looking at devastating food shortages. You are looking at potential famine.
And what about the airlines?
Bankruptcies across the board. Jet fuel is their biggest operating cost. At $180 a barrel, half the airlines in the world would have to stop flying. The global supply chain just freezes.
And the edge case mentioned in the report, the absolute nightmare scenario, is if a supertanker actually hits one of those mines and sinks.
Right. If a supertanker sinks in the deep water channel, it becomes a physical blockage, a massive steel wreck that has to be cleared before anyone else can pass. Then we aren't just talking about a price spike based on fear. We are talking about a hard physical shortage. We are talking about 1973 embargo levels of economic pain, rationing, lines around the block at the gas station, factories shutting down because they literally can't keep the lights on.
So while the stealth jets are flying over Tehran, the real war for the rest of the world, the war for our wallets and our dinners, is happening in that narrow little strip of water.
That's exactly where the global leverage lies. That is the primary pressure point Iran is pushing on to try and get the world to force a stop to the airstrikes.
But let's go back to dry land. Let's go inside Iran itself. Because we talked about the military, we talked about the oil, but the human story, the story on the streets, is what might actually decide how this war ends.
The internal fracture.
The sources call it a reverse 1979. I have to say, I love that phrase. It's so evocative. Can you explain the historical parallel there for us?
Sure. In 1979, the Iranian Revolution was this massive populist explosion. You had millions of people in the streets. But back then, they were uniting behind a religious figure, Ayatollah Khamenei, to overthrow a secular king, the Shah. The energy was this potent mix of religious fervor and anti-monarchism.
And today, how is it a reverse?
Today, the energy is completely inverted. It's a mirror image. You have millions of people potentially hitting the streets, but they are uniting against the religious figures. They are actively celebrating the death of the supreme leader.
The internet is blacked out, which the sources note is standard operating procedure for the regime during unrest. But we have Starlink, we have VPNs, we have smuggled video coming out. What are we actually seeing in these reports? Paint the picture for us.
We are seeing Azadi Square in Tehran. This is the iconic Freedom Square. The videos are grainy, but the audio is unmistakable. It started with fireworks, people actually celebrating the news of the Decapitation strike. But it quickly morphed into massive chanting.
Death to the dictator.
Death to the dictator. Woman, life, freedom. And we are seeing something we haven't seen in decades on this scale. Pre-1979 flags. The lion and sun flag is being waved.
That symbolism has to be powerful.
It's a total public rejection of the last 47 years. It's the people saying, we don't just want a different, slightly moderate Ayatollah, we want the entire system gone.
But we've seen protests in Iran before. The sources list them out. 2009, the Green Movement. 2019, the fuel protests. 2022, after Mahsa Amini was killed. Every single time, the regime crushed them. Brutally. Why is this time actually different? Are observers just wish-casting here?
That is the critical question. The fundamental difference this time is the decapitation. In 2009 and 2022, the supreme leader was alive. He was the anchor. The security forces, the Basi, the IRGC, they had a commander-in-chief they feared and obeyed.
And now that anchor is completely gone.
The king is dead, and there is a massive power vacuum. When a Abbasid militiaman is ordered to shoot into a crowd today, he has to calculate his own survival. If I shoot these people and the regime falls next week, I will be put on trial. I will be lynched in the street. Without the supreme leader guaranteeing their long-term safety, the hesitation creeps in.
And we are seeing that hesitation reported.
We are starting to see it clearly. The source material highlights several defections.
2 IRGC colonels and RD units in the Northwest stood down. They openly refused to fire on protesters.
That is the moment. That is the tipping point for any revolution. Revolutions don't succeed simply when the protesters win the street battles. They succeed when the security forces quit fighting. The fact that we are seeing elite units stand down on day 3 is incredible.
But the regime isn't just rolling over and giving up. In the conservative strongholds, it's a very different story.
Right. In Qum and Mashhad, which are the deeply religious centers, the Basij are fighting back hard. They are killing dozens. These are the regime diehards. They know that if the current system falls, they have absolutely no future in a secular Iran. So they are fighting for their lives. It's becoming a brutal street-by-street civil conflict in those cities.
Who is actually running the show right now for the regime? Who is answering the red phone in Tehran?
It's an interim council. It's currently being led by President Pezeshkian. But looking at their public statements, they sound incredibly desperate.
They are blaming Zionist American aggression, which is, the standard playbook.